40 years. And so I grew up in a traditional Lutheran household, but it wasn't like in Footloose where no one could dance or drink or anything. It was very, very wonderful upbringing that I had, steeped in things like moral values and family traditions and religious ritual.
And then, even though you were brought up in this background, you went on to study in a lot of Bible courses and different things in Dublin. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I always tell my students about the Bible is that if you really want a good story, read the Bible, because there's everything in there. There's adultery, there's lust, there's people being smited, there's, you know, plagues, there's all kinds of drama, subtext and dialogue. And so I've always been really interested in Bible stories in the way that they are prototypes for the stories we tell today. So in Dublin, for example, I did Hebrew and Biblical Studies as an exchange student. So that's what I was doing there.
So you studied Hebrew?
I don't know how much I studied. I mean, studied, maybe is a loose term for what I did in Dublin, but I was in the Hebrew and Biblical Studies department. So.
But was that to study how to speak Hebrew?
No,
or
it was
the
Biblical
studies?
Hebrew. Biblical Hebrew,
I see.
to read Biblical Hebrew.
But those were all precursors to your memoir,
yes.
Poster Child. And tell us a little bit about how Poster Child came about.
Okay. I wrote an essay when I was in graduate school about growing up with a disability. I have an artificial leg, and I had been writing some really bad stories about disabled characters, and they were so bad. And I thought, you know, maybe I should write about my own experience. And I tried that, and I workshopped it in front of like 25 people. And I was mortified. I was so terrified, and it was such a great experience. I got such good feedback, and I thought, you know what? This is the book I'm going to write first. I'm going to make art out of this experience.
Why were they so bad, the way you explained them? I mean, because your book is wrenching to read. I think it's really difficult to read, and that's what you wanted, I guess.
Well, I want people to have an emotional experience.
I did, and it was honest.
Yeah, and to be honest. I think because when I was writing fiction with people with disabilities as characters, I was too removed from the situation. And
but
so now I'm speaking in the I voice.
Yeah, but you had the situation, so how could you be removed?
Well, I think when you write fiction, there's another level of distance you have to establish in order to make contact with a character that's not you. And you have to do the similar thing in writing memoir even, but I think it's different in fiction.
When I started reading, I wondered if there were other books like this, and I think there are other books like yours.
Yeah.
And what were they, and how did they address these issues?
Well, I think most books about people with disabilities fall into two categories. There's the pity category, which is like, oh, my miserable life, and then there's the sort of super achieving category that's usually saved for people who do things like sports or are sports stars. There's not a lot in between those two ends of the spectrum. So I was hoping that this book would offer an honest experience that would appeal to people who don't just have disabilities, because the issues, things like body acceptance, the quest for perfection, those are universal themes, and they're especially, you know, acute for women in this culture particularly.
You were born with a congenital
defect.
Defect.
That's right.
And if that happened today, would they amputate your leg?
They would still, yes.
They still would?
They still would.
So tell us a little bit about that, because you had to learn all about this, but you didn't get to learn about it till you were already grown up.
Well, I didn't want to know about it when I was growing up. I was just like, I didn't want to talk about the leg, I didn't want to think about it, which is documented in the book, sort of the tyranny of adolescence where you just like, I just want to be like everybody else, you know.
But so you always, you had a wooden leg when you started walking.
It was so uncool, yeah, especially as a teenager. It was just like, just morbidly uncool. Yeah, I've always walked with an artificial leg or brace. It's the only body I've ever known, and so that actually is an advantage in many ways, as you can imagine. I did learn a lot about my defect, which is called proximal focal femoral deficiency, which in real language just means that one leg is shorter than the other and can't be corrected in any other way besides amputation.
Does it happen a lot?
It doesn't happen a lot, although I have a really close friend who's my age and has a similar defect, and I have met people through the process of writing this book and going on book tour who have the same defect.
So one of the things that you had to learn about, and I think this whole chapter, is limb technology.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, it's really interesting.
It is really interesting. Especially, for me, it was a struggle because I can't even like program my iPod, so I was like, how am I going to learn about mechanical knees and, you know, computerized knees? But it is amazing. I mean, an important thing to note, though, is it's off limits for many, many people with disabilities because it's just so expensive. I mean, so much of these technological advances are just really expensive.
So is that what the athletes would get?
They would, right. And a lot of the athletes get, they get given legs, in other words.
So that you can use, so you can show.
Test it or something.
Test it, I see. So you wrote the book so that it would be kind of in the middle.
Yeah. Yeah, and I hoped it would be a piece of art. You know, I wanted to make art out of my experience. So I wanted it to be beautiful to read and beautiful language.
And as you were writing and as you were growing up, you got a Fulbright.
I did.
And you went to Korea. Yay.
I did. I went to Korea.
But that seemed like a very painful experience.
It was one of those things where it's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
So tell us about it.
I went to Korea. I was 21, and I had never really dealt with having a disability in a very real way. And I got there, and I couldn't speak the language. I felt totally out of place, and I just decided, I just had a kind of a meltdown, in other words. And I thought, you know what, I've got to get a handle on these issues. So I flew home, and that's when I first started thinking about writing this book. I was like, what happened to me over there? Like, there's a dissonance between how I feel about myself and how I present myself in the world.
Tell us something. Tell us one of those situations when you fell down.
Right, so when I got to Korea,
you can read it in the book, but I think I'd like to hear it from your mouth.
So when I got to Korea, it was the summer, and it's very hot and humid in South Korea in the summer, and I had a hydraulic prosthesis, which I did not take care of. I just would throw it in a bag and throw it off at night, and I was just like, whatever. Well, the hydraulics were heat sensitive, and it was so hot, and I was walking around trying to find my way, and it just, like the liquid just exploded, or something happened, I don't know. And it fell apart. So I literally
Your leg fell apart?
Well, it didn't fall into pieces, but
I mean,
I fell down.
Uh-huh.
And in a puddle of oil, of course, wearing a white dress, of course. So, you know, I'm sitting there thinking, and I just felt like, what am I going to do? And I had to, there was a man selling sort of a collection of items in a little stand, and I was just like, help, you know, sort of sat there, and he came out and helped me, and he found a little Allen wrench, and he tightened the hydraulics. It was such an amazing.
See your leg?
Oh yeah, he was like running out and helping me, and he was wonderful. I mean.
So he tightened it.
Yeah,
he wasn't afraid.
No, he wasn't afraid. I mean, I think he could tell I needed help. So.
I think that's the problem. I think it's the public.
Yeah.
Treating you in a different way.
Of course, yeah, of course, but. You get used to that. If you're different at all, you get used to that.
And before we leave, I think the idea that you got so used to yourself, and as you got older, you wanted to be sexy.
Yeah.
And this you address also in the book.
Yes, I do. And that's been one of the most satisfying set of responses I've gotten from other women with amputations who are like, I feel like this is a guide to dating or something like that, or just, you know, you have to come to terms with myself, and other people aren't going to care. And I think that's a really important message to send, because, you know, we all have things about us that we don't necessarily love or like, and it doesn't make us unlovable. So it's an important thing to remember.
That and then you say you can read the past by your pile of old legs, outgrown legs, because you don't think about outgrowing. You're a very tall girl.
Yeah, now I'm tall. And yeah, it's fun to watch them all lined up on the wall, sort of these little wooden legs that get bigger and bigger and bigger. And then all of a sudden they become like technologically advanced, like when I was in college.
Do you have them all?
I do. My parents have them. Yeah, they have them in a box. So, I know, isn't that funny? And my mom likes to get them out. When I was doing research for the book, it was really interesting to look at them, because they had stains, or there would be like a hole. Once my brother whacked me with a croquet mallet, and there was like a big hole, and she's like, remember that? You know, I fell out of a tree in one of them, and you can see like there's a little grass stain on the side. I mean, it's very interesting to have these like physical touchstones of your history right in front of you. It's pretty amazing.
So now I see why you wrote the book. I think it's a really good. It was good for you, probably, and it's good for other people. It's
I hope so.
For people who don't have those problems, and to understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you for watching the Joan Quinn Profiles. Keep writing to 777 South Figueroa, 44th floor, Los Angeles 90017. Bye.